Welcome back. So let's get into our weekly feature where we discuss some of the key stories of the week. The start of the Madlanga Commission, of course, is without a doubt dominating headlines. Also, the DA having announced that Helen Zille is the party's Joburg Mayoral candidate in next year's elections, and he just under an hour ago had a lengthy conversation with Mlanga about her plans for the city. But we discuss all of those stories and more with columnist Mr. Bhekisisa Mncube and University of South Africa political analyst Sanet Solomo, who's joining us, and we also have Mr. Tshepo, who is of course a reputation expert with Reputation First. Guys, a good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. What a week, right? I think this is, one could argue that the week that was is probably one of the more anticipated weeks of the year, especially following the 6th of July. Sanet, I do want to start with you and say, okay, so we've had 3 days of General Mkhwanazi at the Madlanga Commission. As we got into the weekend, a lot of the reflections then start to look at, okay, did he give evidence of really some of the allegations that he gave to us on the 6th of July? Is there a sense that he's on the right side of cleaning up the police as we listen to that 3 days? I think let's start with your assessment just from that point of view.
I think that his testimony was definitely very interesting. He painted a broad, very descriptive picture of what was happening in terms of the police, and also drawing parallels between politicians and the people who are within the police force. I think that while the evidence was a bit lacking, I think that at least the testimony gives us a broad outline of what can be expected. And I think that this is a good starting point for actual investigations. I think that the alleged leaked voice notes are also good. And I think that it will, with time, we'll be obviously finding more information, and hopefully more evidence will be presented in the coming days.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of it, though, still so many more questions left, right, about, how much communication there was, for instance, between the police minister and the National Police Commissioner, and some of the struggles that Mkhwanazi says he had in trying to speak to those that are further up the ladder there. Mr. Mncube, I mean, just moments that really stood out for you. I think the biggest shocks of the past 3 days of that Wednesday, Thursday, Friday at the Madlanga Commission.
Yes, Naledi, I actually watched a little bit of it, but I had the fortune of having the full statement, all 100 pages from General Mkhwanazi. And I figured something very interesting, that he actually has a core, a cycle of these people. I call them a dirty dozen, because there are 12 of them. And as he had said on that July 6th statement, each sector is represented: the police, the judiciary, business people, entrepreneurs, you name them. What I did find when I watched a little bit of it was that he came across as a person who's well prepared, a person who knows what is at stake. Because if he gets this one wrong, his career and reputation is on the line. What people need to understand is that the statement that he made, the 100 pages, is accompanied by annexures that are with the commission. That is where the lawyers come in, who are going to be interviewing everybody mentioned by Mkhwanazi, and those people will have to respond to the Mkhwanazi's statement. But the commissioners will also use annexures to ask those interesting questions. So we are yet to see a real drama. We thought we had seen the drama. We have already had a taste of it on July 6th. The drama is still yet to come. There's no doubt that our society is overrun with corruption. And we have always known, some of us, that certain politicians were part of this rot. And I think it's about time now that they are not only exposed, but in South Africa, people should wear those orange overalls. I love them. Seriously, I do, Naledi. Don't you love them?
I don't know if love is quite the word, but that is quite a direction you're going. You know, Mr. Mncube says the career and reputation of General Mkhwanazi is on the line. And as you said that, Mr. Mncube, Tsapo, and this is for you, I thought As we watch this commission, though, a lot of careers and reputations are on the line. And, you know, that going to be something that even as we go further into it, for instance, with the National Police Commissioner tomorrow taking the stand, his reputation, his career very much on the line. I mean, just talk to me about what for you, Tsepo, stands out as some of the more vulnerable personalities here. We saw Mkhwanazi also pointing a finger at Diane Cole-Barnard of the DA and Fadil Adams of the NCC, and them needing to come out quickly and give their version of events. I mean, that was quite a moment.
Yeah, good evening. I think everybody is really at risk, reputationally speaking, but at test here is the reputation of South Africa's security cluster, the reputation of South African police, the reputation of the political leaders, the people who are accountable for the South African police services, and the extent to which South Africa is perceived both locally and internationally as a hub of corruption, as a hub of crime, where hardcore criminals and the mafias, if we may want to call them, gather together consistently to tell their own story, to capture the state. And that's where we are at. Yeah. So while we are still at an early stage, we must appreciate holistically without necessarily spending too much time on individual names. But we must appreciate that this shows that we are transparent as a nation, and that transparency needs to come with consequences and accountability. If it doesn't, it's really a theater of politics and a theater of what some may say spinning, and that does not do any good for the country's image, especially as we try to emerge out of the financial sector issues of grey listing towards a far more trusted economy and trusted financial system. So this says a lot about the country more than the individuals themselves, and that we have a deepened problem, and that's the person whose reputation is at risk here is actually South Africa, not just the individuals.
Yeah, the image of South Africa. Well, let's take some calls. The number, of course, is 01059460010. We do have Richard on the line. I think you're in Johannesburg. Richard, good evening.
Good evening to you and your listeners and your panel.
Thanks for calling. Talk to us, Richard.
Look, I'm extremely disappointed in Mkhwanazi's 3 days of testimony, because what emerged from his testimony is a lot of bitterness on his side. He's got issues with his superiors. He's got issues with the fact that he's no longer the National Commissioner. And everybody who is contrary to his opinion is part of a drug syndicate. You look at him saying the presidency, IPED, IDEC, Professor Meriti Haas, Paul O'Sullivan, Cole-Barnard, the MPs. It's like the whole world is fighting against General Mkhwanazi. But this is the bottom line that people need to understand in the country. General Mkhwanazi, with 30 years of service, is in the position to take action. And that's the biggest question mark and red flag, is to say, why is he crying about matters where if he has information and he has substantial evidence, he acts accordingly? Right now, we've got the whole country, including the presidency, working in a drug syndicate cartel that's trying to take over the country, and the only person saving us is General Mkhwanazi, which is quite difficult to stomach right now, and from a legal perspective is making a mockery of our democracy.
Sure, strong one there. Okay, Richard, thank you so much for calling in. Sanet, I don't know if you want to respond to what we've heard from Richard. And this is the thing, one of the things that we've also needed to talk about is, in that 3 days of his testimony, Sanet, we do need to remind ourselves that some of these allegations do still have to be tested moving forward. And maybe that's something we need to actually look at. But just as I stack just some thoughts on you, we've also got the ad hoc committee that will soon start its work. And so, of course, the EFF saying they want to see Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi summoned before that ad hoc committee. And it's hard not to reflect on how Diane Cole-Barnard's name came up on Thursday. And, of course, she's an alternate member of that ad hoc committee. Lots to look at in the week that's coming as well, Sanet.
I think that it's really a lot happening. I do think that his appearance before the committee, I think, would be imperative. Given the alleged or the allegations, I think that there might be a possibility that she might have to sit out, especially when he's going to be giving his testimony, just to ensure that should there actually be evidence for this, that obviously the process is not impaired by her presence. But moreover, I do think that I think that this would obviously be a large risk on his end if there wasn't evidence to support these allegations. But I also think that the MPA was quite right when they were saying that everything that is being presented is just people's testimonies and that everything still needs to be investigated. And I think by giving that background also, it allows the processes to play out without South Africans drawing conclusions about what is happening or what is not happening. And I think until both of these processes are concluded, we just have to sit and obviously wait to see what evidence comes forth.
Yeah. Bhekisisa, tomorrow we see National Police Commissioner Fani Masemola taking the stand. Expectations of what he needs to put on the table.
I've been sort of watching his demeanor in the last few weeks. It so seems, I may be wrong, that him and General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi seem to be in the, if we were to call it a corner, they seem to be in the same corner actually, considering the steps that Masemola has taken since the July 6th, the episode. Because the 121 dockets that seem to have sparked the whole thing are back to the political killing trust team. Arrests have already been made. And we know that the copies of those have been are with the commission. So at some stage, they are going to form part of the testimony to see what is it that the politicians wanted to hide, because it's politicians who are being killed. The political trust team is investigating why politicians and traditional leaders are being killed. We know they are being killed by politicians. In cahoots with who? The entrepreneurs. So you can imagine a political oversight by a politician over the killing of other politicians. It would come to a point where the investigations seem to cut too close to the bone. And that is where you'll find all sorts of shenanigans happening. I think Mkhwanazi should be commended just for telling us that what happens behind the closed scenes. Even if we don't get the whole dirty dozen behind bars. But I think this is a start. And actually, as Tsep was saying, it's a good start for our country to show that our democracy is actually working. If there are allegations, we put them out there in the open and we interrogate them and we find the truth. I think that is important for our country.
Yeah. Let's take another call quickly. We're taking now one from Sanele Mnambiti in KZN. Sanele, good evening.
Naledi Moleo.
Ngiyaphila bhuti mujani?
Ngiyaphila kakhulu sami, ngibonge nehambeli zakho.
Siyabonga, khuluma bhuti.
No, look my sister, I'm just having one concern here. Are we not carried away too much by all this saga of General Mkhwanazi? Because it's still the allegation that are not tested. What if we can wait until, we finalize everything, even his allegation are being put into test, then we can have a conclude? Because my fear here is one. My fear is, at the end, we will blame the commission and we'll say the commission are like this and like that, because we are put ourselves into the center of the public opinion court. So let's hold ourselves and look at all the witnesses and all the evidence. And I'm feeling sorry for the National Commissioner, Mr. Masemola. That will be a hell of week on his head, seriously. Then the story of my day, it's what they said, it's a renewed hope for the city of gold, so surprisingly.
Yeah.
And lastly, my sister,
yes.
I want the panelists to, because I'm looking at this, are we at the exposure of the lawkeepers versus the lawmakers?
Okay, some interesting points that you make there, and that question at the end, they're also very critical. But Sanele, thank you so much for calling in. Sanele is calling in from KZN, and he says, let's continue to listen to testimony at the Commission before we make up our minds around the real state of our criminal justice system. Let's take a short break. We'll talk about other big stories of the week on the other side of this. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're still watching Newsfeed PM, the late edition, as we continue to reflect on the 7 days that was in South African news headlines. And of course, we continue with our panel. Tsepo, I think I want to come to you on this one. Of course, from a reputation point of view, quite the week for the African National Congress, right? The ANC, for instance, starting off that week with that big roll call for councillors, saying to them, you need to shape up or ship out, giving them an action plan and getting them ready for 2026. But that one moment at the beginning of the week sparking quite the debate, the president of the party mentioning DA-led municipalities and talking about how there is some that can be learned from those areas. I mean, that was quite the moment. I don't know if you think that that did damage for brand ANC ahead of the elections.
There's political rhetoric that happens every time. So politicians have got the license to say controversial statements to make a point. But I could also feel when, as he was talking, that there was a degree of frustration, and he's trying to articulate that this is frustrating, we're not getting it right, and why are we not getting it right? But I think in hindsight, there might have been, on the part of the president, at least a degree of an error of speech, an error of judgment, if that was deliberately stated. We're yet to hear from him about his position, because you can say the facts as they are, and honesty and transparency is important, but equally, you don't want to give necessarily your biggest opponent the platform, the biggest billboard, the headline for them to go with for their next local government elections. And in the short term, they've already taken advantage of this. I mean, you don't only have to go and look at the DA's social media platforms, listen to what Helen Zille has been saying, listen to Johnny and Steenhuisen. They are all saying the DA is a performer. But if you don't believe us, go and ask the president of South Africa, President Cyril Ramaphosa. So I think for the ANC, it is embarrassing. It's a moment of something, a tail between our legs, and one would be interested in see what is the strategy of the president going to be, and what is he going to say, because simply ignoring it allows the DA to actually keep. So it's actually going to be you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, because if he acknowledges the error, they're still going to run with it. And if he doesn't, if he keeps quiet, it's still going to be a story. It's fascinating how things came out. But I wouldn't urge my political principle, if I was his advisor, I was not going to advise him to endorse or seemingly endorse the opponent, despite how honest you want to be.
Yeah, seemingly endorse. I mean, Sanet, to you, when you reflect on that moment, is what you heard, the president de-campaigning the ANC in that moment, right? And reflect on that. But also, here's the reality of it. The core message, though, was councillors need to perform. You've got the messages coming from Balula as well today, saying he's called on councillors to continue working closely with their branches to ensure coordinated efforts. 2026 is coming, and the municipal challenges that we face across the country, just massive, right? So do you think that an action plan like the one that the ANC-NEC was able to deliver to councillors is actually going to be the difference? And that there will be accountability for councillors ahead of 2026?
I think that they've dropped the ball on a number of issues. I think that firstly, there has been a lack of involvement in terms of the different municipalities and actually ensuring that the municipalities are functioning very well. And we've seen this deterioration over a course of 30 years, with very few of those municipalities over the last 5 years receiving clean audits, etc. So I think that's where the challenge is, the lack of checking in and checking whether or not these municipalities are rendering services. We know that service delivery is quite poor in large portions of the country. That's not something that you can undo with even a year of preparation. I think that at this point in time, acknowledging their mistakes and also working on some of the more tangible issues would be the smallest, but also for them, the biggest wins that they can do. I think that most of these have been well documented, but I also think that in part of preparing for the local government elections, they should also be acknowledged that councillors have been left to their own devices in a lot of these municipalities, and that they can't just be the only ones bearing the responsibilities for this. Because if you take a municipality that has a very small revenue base, where are they getting their support from, and would they have the capabilities to actually render these services? So those are some of the things that they need to look at. So I think an entire overhaul would not be possible in the coming few years or the coming few months, especially in the run-up to the 2026 local government elections. I think it's just a matter of dealing with the most urgent. For some municipalities, it would be fixing roads. For others, it would be just having access to water. So it's very basic things, but it's a starting point, and I think that's what people are looking for.
Yeah, Bhekisisa, I mean, this just your thoughts on the ANC's road ahead of the 2026 local government elections with their efforts to motivate councillors. I mean, I also want to reflect on how you had earlier on in the week chairperson of the party, Gwede Mandashe, making quite the controversial point, saying that councillors are better at singing than they are at performing. I mean, that was, I can only call it scathing, right? And a tough thing, I'm sure, for councillors to hear. Was that the right sort of messaging?
Naledi, is even worse than that. For how long South Africans are being asked to attend baby showers, and all the babies born at a local government are all stillborn? For how long? You know, it's when there's something terribly wrong with the womb, you do not take Panado and some gut medicine, because both those things have nothing to do with the womb. And the ANC knows this. They pretend not to know it. And it's sad, because I gave up my youth for the ANC. They are going to be completely finished when we go to the next local government election. All this kind of rhetoric is too late. Comparing the ANC performance to the DA councillors is not going to do anyone any good. Saying they cannot perform, they're better at singing, everybody knows that. I was saying to my wife yesterday, because I had a tune in my head, a revolutionary song in my head, and I said to my wife, you see, if I could sing, I'll be president of the ANC by now. But I can't sing. So here I am sitting on the sidelines as a bridesmaid. And it seems to be my faith. But it's also a faith of many South Africans. We don't want brain surgery for our dying mothers. We just want water. Can we just get water at the very least? Is that too much to ask for from our politicians, who are well paid? But most of them, councillors, as we all know, don't even have matric. They're supposed to manage 500 billion. I can't manage R1 million with a degree and a diploma. Now try to drill that one down to someone without matric. We're always going to end up here where we are, where the tanker mafia runs the local government, where the electricity subcontractors go to site not to fix the electricity, to put it off so that they can return again the next morning to fix it. And they say it's going to take too long, and then they stop it, and they stop and start. All the time there are issues. It seems these issues are structural, but no, they're actually man-made. So that to siphon money from the municipalities. Someone was telling me in Durban last week that actually they don't even sabotage the water system anymore. They go to the reservoir and turn off the plug that allows water to leave the reservoir. And then a week later, everything is now beginning to be a serious crisis. But they've made the money, and then they will go and turn on the thing, and then life continues until the next time they want to make some money. So the ANC has dropped the ball, as Solomon was saying. We are finished, completely finished. And we need something drastic from the voters. We need something drastic from political parties. we're waiting for something new from Bosa, from Mzansi. Yeah, I don't know. But for the ANC, this is goodbye. They should be having a funeral.
Yeah, you know, you talk about water, and that was quite the tough conversation. You had Dada Morero, for instance, promising the people of Coronationville that this week the water would be back, and he had to go back and say, no, I'm actually not going to be able to deliver on that. And the challenges are there. This is all happening at a time, of course, when the Democratic Alliance then announces that the Joburg Mayoral candidate is Helen Zille. And just under an hour ago, she was in conversation with my colleague, Naledi Moleo, and she says that her promise is to deliver quality services in the metro. And of course, that is dependent on the electorate making her party the biggest in council by a large margin. Let's listen to a little bit of what she had to say earlier.
In 2016, we had to go into a governing arrangement that involved an agreement with the EFF. I was very opposed to it at the time. It was one of the reasons that I fell out with the leadership of the party at the time. But it's impossible to have a stable coalition if you have to keep on pandering to the EFF to stay in power. Then it was also very difficult in the second time in 2021 because the EFF, without any agreement with us, voted for our mayoral candidate and then could easily unelect our mayoral candidate, and so we had to see if we survived from council meeting to council meeting. Now, when you are that unstable in government, it's very difficult to deliver. This time, the voters have the opportunity to change the game. They can make the DA the biggest party by as big a margin as possible so that we can put together a stable government that can stay the course. And that will make all the difference.
No. Helen Zille there, DA's Joburg mayoral candidate in the 2026 local government election, speaking to Toli a little bit earlier. And you hear her in that clip, Sanet, talking about really needing the electorate to give the DA a bigger sort of margin, so for the sake of stability in Joburg. What do you think her chances are going to be? And do you think that her entry into the race for Joburg is going to be that boost that gives the DA more sway in the city?
I think that based on her recent presentations and based on her recent engagements with the public, I think that there are a lot of people who are quite optimistic about having her. I think that there is a lot of nostalgia around the kind of Johannesburg that she grew up around, and also turning it back into how it was. I think that obviously she spoke about all of the opportunities that they could have and trying to obviously replicate good governance in terms of Johannesburg. But I've had the same concern for quite a number of years. If you look at the Western Cape, especially Cape Town, the suburbs are very well managed. If you look at your constituencies, Bergfleet, Sea Point, Greenpoint, all of them are very well managed. But my biggest challenge has always been how they would deal with the townships, be it Mitchell's Plain, be it Khayelitsha, be it Mlanga, and all of these other places. If you look at the rest of the Western Cape, for example, Langebaan, very well managed, very beautiful. But if you look at something like Saldanha, for example, not as well managed, not as well maintained. The DA has a reputation of doing exceptionally well where there is a tax base, where people are doing well. So I think that Sandton, Bryanston, etc. will be fine. But the question is, what are her plans for Alexandra? What are her plans for Tembisa? What is she going to be doing in other townships? And I think that once we can actually see what they'll be doing, I think that there would be a lot of more optimism. But I also think that people are hoping that we don't see the kind of gentrification that we've seen in the Western Cape. There was a time when Divatarkan, for example, used to be an affordable area to live in the Western Cape, where you could live in the Boerkaap, etc. But if you look at it now, all of those spaces are occupied by foreign people. You have your Germans, your other people from other European countries living there, and it's become so unaffordable for South Africans that people can't even afford their rates and taxes in Mitchell's Plain. So the question will then become, will they, with their development, with the infrastructure development that they'll be doing, etc., will there still be space for people who are in the middle and lower classes? Will they be able to afford living, for example, in your Kempton parks, etc., or would it become a space where eventually you won't even be able to live in the area where you're living because so much of gentrification has taken place to the point that you might have to rent a mukuku? So I think that's some of the questions that I have in preparation for the local government elections and also for people considering voting for the DA in 2029.
Sure. Yeah, interesting. Tsepo, the DA's prospects, what do you foresee in 2026 for Johannesburg especially?
Yeah, I mean, Helen Zille is a candidate with a track record. She's been a leader of the DA, but I tend to agree with my fellow panelists that Solomon, that the trend that they have to do great in sort of suburbs, in areas that where people have access to resources, live and trade and do business. That trend is worrisome because it doesn't seem to translate into tangible results in townships and places where poor people live. And it doesn't happen consistently. And you see that towards elections, politicians will sing and dance, but the reality of a day-to-day life in South Africa for many poor people remains the same. Yeah. And so that's a worrisome factor. I think they chose popularity over this mayoral opportunity. Popularity and credibility of a leader and their history and track record over bringing up emerging new leaders who could actually hopefully help shift the dial so that they don't necessarily reinvent the wheel. Importantly, do they stand a chance? Of course, I think the next elections are for anyone to take anyone's guess given the complexity of our political environment. But they do have an opportunity to grow if they provide new solutions, and importantly, if they bring in new leaders who are willing to take the risk and support a narrative that is more developmental and a narrative of transformation. And that's where South Africa should be going.
Yeah, Bhekisisa, are your views? So do you think that Helen Zille can convince residents of Johannesburg?
She is 74 years old. We're going to be having a mayoral funeral in her first year in office. I mean, you know, the problem with South Africa is not about the DA, it's not about the ANC. There's a dearth of leadership in the country. That is why our president is over 70. That is why Helen Zille is standing for office at 74. And in a country that is got something called the youth dividend, and then everybody else is in the departure lounge. What kind of a society are we building? Why would anyone give off everything they have in their dying days for a country they will not live in? Because they don't have a skin in the game. You know, so we are in deeper trouble actually than we originally thought. Long before Mkhwanazi, we're in deeper trouble. We just simply don't have leaders. Because if you get into political arena, you're going to die. You're going to need a political killing trust team. So people who should be in leadership are those with are not there, and those who are in are those with thick skin and possibly private security, so that they can travel around in convoys. It's a sad situation. But in any event, talking about Zille stands some chance. She has two types of reputation. One of a person who can deliver, which we all know it can be backed up by AG's reports and all other metrics. But there's another one. When she's on Twitter, she's not the Helen Zille who unraveled the death of Steve Biko. She is something else, a white supremacist. You ask yourself questions. Is that what Johannesburg needs in 2027? A white supremacist, a woman who, by design, not default, ran Cape Town so beautifully, but for the rich and famous, and forgot about Nyanga. So that's why I'm saying it's not about the DA. And in any event, I've lived in a DA-controlled municipality, Tshwane municipality in Pretoria, since 2016. They couldn't find us a mayor. They kept changing mayors every other month. That wasn't good. And it's still, until they lost the municipality to something called Action SA. I don't know what that is. But so the problem that we're facing in the country is actually the issue of leadership. Someone said, I will never work with the ANC. That was Simon Mashaba. What is he doing in Tshwane? He's working with the ANC. Our politicians cannot be trusted. There is no integrity. They have no reputation to speak of. We are finished as a country.
Yeah. You know, this has been such an interesting conversation, and I've enjoyed all of your insights. Thank you so much, Mr. Bhekisisa Mncube, the columnist with very colorful wording. Mr. Tshepo Madzeba, of course, who is MD of Reputation First, and Sanet Solomo, of course, well-known political analyst. Let's take a look at a few of the WhatsApps that have come in from our viewers on the big stories of the week. We'll bring those up on the screen now. Osireo says, hi, Naledi. My story of the week goes to Ramaphosa for lashing ANC councillors for not delivering services on time and for not getting clean audits. What surprised me is that he's not taking any action against them. Indeed, ANC has institutionalized corruption. Anonymous says ANC roll call or whatever they call it. Mandasha comments about singing councillors in there. And then the biggest bombshell from their president praising DA. Chickens coming home to roost. Rest in peace, ANC. Anonymous, thank you for that. Another one that says, hi, Naledi. Naledi, the Fourth Estate is implicated in the Madlanga Commission. However, the media mentions everyone else except its practitioners. Why is that? Well, we wait to see what comes out of the Madlanga Commission. Anonymous, thank you so much for sending in that WhatsApp. We'll take a caller quickly. Sifudi is in Randfontein. Sifudi, good evening to you, sir.
Evening to you and your guest, Naledi.
Evening, Sifudi. Talk to us.
You know, the bar has been lowered. I don't know whether ageism will wash. To me, we need somebody who's ethical, regardless of his or her age. Somebody who's a patriot, who will be able to deliver, because right now in South Africa, even the young ones can't deliver. We have young chaps who can't deliver. And we used to have older people. Madiba came out of prison in the 70s. He delivered better than even the young ones. I think this ageism, we ought to put it in the back burner and deal with bread and butter issues. And what we are facing, we've reached the bottom of the barrel, and we ought to bottom out. And we need somebody, regardless of his or her color or creed, to take us out of this quagmire. Good evening to you.
Good evening to you, Sifudi. What an incredibly important point. Ultimately, for any South African, they just want the results, the services to be delivered. Right, we wrap things up there. Thank you so much for staying with us. We've got your headlines, though, on the other side of this. Stay with us.